welcome everyone to the launch for our wonderful new book. It was published today, so hopefully everyone who's joined the webinar will get their copy at the special half price coming soon. As you know, the book is called Creating a School Library with Impact, and we've been working on this for maybe 18 months on SLG. Various authors are here tonight, and we all wrote more than one chapter, and we'll be telling you about them tonight. We wrote this very much as a beginner's manual, if you like. It was my project. I wanted to leave SLG with this book because I was concerned that there were a lot of people who were starting off in our profession who needed a lot of help. You could see all the questions. If you belong to a couple of Facebook groups like I do, you can see all the questions, and we wanted to address that. So we knew we had people on the committee with various levels of expertise, so we put together this book, and that's what this is about. For those of you who don't know, the School Libraries Group, SLG, is one of the special interest group of CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals. We are a very large group within CILIP. In fact, we are one of the largest groups and one of the most active groups. A lot of what we do, you don't see because it's behind the scenes. But we have been on all-party parliamentary groups talking about literacy. We are often consulted behind the scenes. Again, a lot of it, what we do, you don't see, but I think everyone who comes onto the committee is really surprised by the amount of work that goes on. And this has been one of our big projects. We hoped to launch our badged open course, our BOC tonight, that we have done with the Open University. And the BOC accompanies this book. It's a free course on Future Learn. However, we are constrained by the Open University's time frame, and they have been going slightly slower than we would have liked. So they're not quite ready. But as soon as the course is ready, we will launch that as well. So again, that's included a huge amount of work. Rosalind, one of our librarians who left on committee, she left a year ago, is still working on the project, and Nick Cavender and Sarah Pavey are both, and Barbara, all three of them have been working on that simultaneously with the book, which has been amazing. And I just want to flag up to you quickly before we start that we have a conference next year, an in-person conference, which we're really thrilled about. It's the 21st to 23rd of April, so around Shakespeare's birthday, and we will be back at Milton Keynes, which is where our last in-person conference was. And the theme of the conference is School Libraries, Diverse, Inclusive and Agents for Change. So do come, and when we advertise that, please do join us for the conference. Okay, so we're going to go through the book chapter by chapter. So I will hand over to Barbara Band, who's talking about the role of the library and the librarian within the school. Thank you, Barbara.
Cool. I hope everyone can hear me okay, and good evening, and great that you can be here. Now, chapter 1, as Caroline has already said, looks at the role of the library and the librarian within the school, because the role of the library underpins everything you do. It's your starting point in a way. Now, the role is multifaceted. If you were to talk to people about what school libraries do, you get a different story from everybody. thing is, in today's world, we have to show our value and benefits. We have to demonstrate our impact, which means we have to feed into the school's aims and targets. If we focus just on providing for student needs, that actually may be nothing to do with their targets. You know, your students may decide they would prefer a nice relaxed space to recharge and unwind, you know, comics to read, graphic novels, whereas a school target may be, and they're probably all schools have this target, is to improve GCSE grades by 1 point. So you'll get footfall into the library. You'll maybe get loan issues increase because your students are in there and you can talk to them about books and promote your books. But you probably won't get any tangible evidence that you can measure to link with that target of the school. But on the other hand, if you just focus on your school targets, if you insist on everybody coming into your library has to study, and you only have what the school considers worthy fiction on your shelves, you know, they don't agree with graphic novels, that's not proper reading. And if you only have curriculum linked non-fiction resources, then you may find that you don't get so much library use. And by the same token, you won't have any evidence to gather of impact because nobody's using you. Now, the thing with libraries is if you're not really being used, and if you're not gathering that evidence and impact, and I know Lucy's going to talk more about this later on, you will be, any library is susceptible to budget cuts and ultimately closure. So you need to have a balance. You need to, your role encompasses the school mission, the aims and priorities. You're facilitating teaching and learning, and you're also meeting the needs of the school community. This is a symbiotic relationship, all these three things, okay? So when you're thinking about the role of your library, it's important to consider all these aspects in relation to what you do and the services you provide. Not everything you do will cover every single part of your role, but you can't really ignore one of these aspects. So can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. Right, as I said, if you're asked what the school library does, you'll get lots of different answers, but a very simple answer is to support and provide for the needs of the school community. Now, rather than just say students, if you say school community, that covers all those aspects, because the community of the school consists of several groups. As you can see here, they all have different needs. Not everything you do will feed into what each of these stakeholders wants, but there's a huge amount of overlap. Those good exam results, for example, I should imagine all groups are interested in those. Your students and your parents will want good exam results for further education in their careers. Your staff tend to be measured by performance targets and exam results. Your SMT will be answerable to your governors, and your governors and your SMT will be answerable to Ofsted. So you can see how one aspect, supporting students to get better exam results, to achieve more in their subjects, actually impacts on all stakeholder groups. So if you consider the needs of all these groups and how the library can support them, you are able to create a library that is beneficial and valuable to the school as part of the school community. So the first step, as I said, is to think about your role within your own situation. So, and this will vary depending on your school's priorities, how the perception of your staff have of what a school library does, or their experience of a school library. And it also, the use of the library impacts on this and the needs of the stakeholders. You can't do everything, and there may be clashes. So this is where you have to think about priorities, given your time and the budget you have. And this ultimately needs a discussion with your line manager. So next slide, please. So what does chapter 1 cover? Right, it looks at both the school development plan and library development plan and how these are connected. It looks at different stakeholder groups and their possible needs for you to consider. It covers important documentation, both school documents and library policies, and it also mentions reports. Legal aspects are covered in chapter 1, including copyright and safeguarding. So chapter 1 of this book will help you understand and determine the role of the library within your school. So next slide, please. You've got me for 2 chapters because they're chapter 1 and chapter 2 in the book. So okay, right, the next one, yeah. So chapter 2 is the library environment. Now I should say, this is a photo of one of my libraries. This was taken during a refurbishment. So my library did not look like this all the time. But I have to say, I have been into some schools where it's been things piled everywhere. And part of it is because we often don't get the storage space, do we? Or we've got so many projects on the go that we need to have them out to deal with when we've got that spare 10 minutes, okay? The problem is when you have a library that's a bit messy like this, there's no cohesion. You know, you've got boxes and books piled everywhere. And I've seen libraries where there's quite, you know, old posters on the notice boards and with out-of-date things. And that sort of doesn't really give the right impression, because first impressions are important. What that library looks like, what people see when they walk through your door, they will make a judgment on. Now, psychologists say it takes 1/10 of a second, that's crazy, 1/10 of a second for people to judge someone and make a first impression. And the problem is that first impression, once you've made it, it's very hard to change it, okay? Now, people coming into a library won't know you have a to-do list as long as your arm. They won't think about you maybe taking work home to catch up, or do some stuff at the weekend to get a head start on your week, or that you may have had just 4 classes in a row to deal with and a break time, and you've had no chance to deal with the pile of books that's just arrived that morning. That's why they're on your desk. So the thing is, a library environment does not just mean what it looks like. Next slide, please. Oh. When you are creating your library environment, you're trying to create a specific ethos, right? You want it to be welcoming to all students, want it to be inclusive, where everyone can recognise themselves, both in the books and around in displays and things. It also needs to be a place where students feel they can come and ask questions and either have their needs met or be given further information of other resources that might help them, you know, and that might be resources locally or on the internet, wherever, okay? It has to be accessible, both physically, so that students can reach it, so that you don't want, you know, your library, and I know some of you probably got libraries like this, but up the top of stairs, and if a student's on crutches, they can't get there. Okay, so really, ideally, the school library should be accessible and easily reachable, and somewhere where students pass by every day. Also inside the library, students need to be able to negotiate around tables and chairs and reach the top of shelves. It has to be open as well when they need to use it. That's another aspect of accessibility, you know, not shut for meetings, not used for detentions, because if they come along and it's shut, and it's like anywhere, if you go along to somewhere and it's closed, and you maybe go again and it's closed, you stop bothering to try to access that shop because it's too much hassle. It's the same with the library, really. All this being tied up with being welcoming and inclusive is a feeling of being inviting. You want your space to be inviting. If I was to say to you, you know, the chair by the fire looked inviting, you'd all know what I meant. You don't want to maybe curl up in it with your book. And you want that same feeling in your library where you want students to want to come into you. And I also like to think that libraries should be intriguing. You know, there should be an element to them that sparks students and maybe staff interest, something different, whether that's a display, poster, student artwork, all sorts of things. You know, you want to attract their curiosity. Next slide, please. So chapter 2, what is in chapter 2? It covers all the essential elements when considering the library ethos. Factors to consider with regards to your layout and furniture. It touches on technology, although there's more of that in chapter 6, which Caroline's going to talk about. It looks at staff responsibilities and further training. There are also various classification systems used, cataloguing and the library management systems spoken about in the chapter, and the use of the library, which can have a huge impact on its ethos, and also the visual aspects, such as your displays and posters. So basically, chapter 2 gives you guidelines for how you can create that welcoming and inclusive library where your students want to come to. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. We now move on to Sarah Pavey, who has written about behaviour, that thorny issue that we all have to face sometime. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. I've been a bad girl because I haven't got any slides. so that's good start for writing a chapter on behaviour. Anyway, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about this chapter. I think behaviour is one of the things. If we can get behaviour right, then that gives us a pleasant working library environment. So it's really key to understanding how to provide a good library service. And I think one of the things about behaviour is if you look and you think, well, if you tried to play a game that had no rules, it really wouldn't be a very interesting game because somebody would cheat and win everything. So we do need to have some boundaries created in our library. But one of the things that I certainly found when I first started working in libraries is this trouble, because the kind of environment you want at break times, leisure times, is very different to the kind of atmosphere that you want when there's a lesson going on in your library. So we have to bear that in mind. And we also have to bear in mind the fact that most kids want to be good. They don't want to cause disruption. It's very, very few that require a serious intervention. The majority of students that you'll come across, who may be a little bit leery, are probably people who are unhappy. Perhaps they are just unable to work because they haven't got the expertise or they haven't got the materials they need. Perhaps they're students who never get praised for anything. So they come in feeling negative and thinking they're going to get told off. And also, you might have people who've got special needs or people that just, aren't getting the grades that they're expected to get and being put under pressure. They might also be students who've got very poor social skills. They don't know how to communicate, and maybe they've got low self-esteem. And we've all come across those kids that just have tantrums and flare up no matter what age they are. And a lot of this that we deal with is to do with the fact that they are not just growing their little bodies, but they're growing their brains as well. And the brain is underdeveloped. And so some of these behaviours they exhibit are literally part of growing up. And we have to recognise that. Now, there is a substance that flows around whenever we get told off or something like that. And it's called adrenaline. And the problem with adrenaline is that it actually takes 90 minutes to get out of your body. So in the library, we quite often have the kids who've been chucked out of class and are migrating. They need somewhere to go, so they might try and put them in the library. And then they bung them back into a class again 15, 20 minutes later. That adrenaline is still surging around their body and they get told off again and back they go. And it's a vicious cycle. So sometimes we have to learn to stand up to people and say, actually, I think they need a little bit longer in here to calm down. In this chapter, we learn about how to communicate so that we're actually giving positive directions and how we're trying to expect good behaviour. And we can do that also by setting the rules we have effectively and making sure they're appropriate. So the chapter's going to look at 3 particular areas that I know as a librarian cause great angst. One is maintaining the correct library noise levels. One is about whether you're allowing eating and drinking within the library and the sneaky eating and drinking that they do. And the just crowd control at break times and before and after school. How do you limit that? The golden rule that we have really is whatever you exhibit, they are going to pick up on. So you've got to be like a mirror. And if you want things to be calm, then you need to be calm as well. We need to model that we expect good behaviour and not highlight bad behaviour. So in a nutshell, what this chapter is going to do, it's going to show you how it's up to us to set the behaviour boundaries, how we are going to make sure that we model that good behaviour, how we expect that good behaviour, and how we can teach people how to respond to that. We're also going to be fair in our judgments, but we're going to actually make some boundaries that the students have got to adhere to so that we can actually put that into practice. And we're going to find out how we can deal when perhaps there is a slightly more severe problem, who we can go to. Because all of this is really important. If we can get the behaviour right, then we're providing that calm working atmosphere and make sure that the library is there for everybody, not just a small minority of people. So that's the chapter in a nutshell.
So I'm moving now to Annie Everall, who will be, as I said, talking about her chapter. So welcome, Annie.
My chapter, chapter 4, which is around creating a reading rich environment, and I'd sum it up really as passion, promotion and practical, because we all want students to read more. School librarians are usually very passionate about reading and want that passion to emanate from them, from the library, for their students and across the school. And if students are being exposed through the environment, if that environment gives a message that it values reading and that reading is something for everyone, then that helps enormously in the school librarian's job. So this is a very practical chapter that focuses on how school librarians can help create that rich reading rich environment in their school. And it explores a range of topics within that. So starting from a point is, if you're a new school librarian and you want your school to get involved in a national initiative or a national promotion and you're not sure what's available, it explores some of the major initiatives that you could get involved with, like World Book Day and like National Non-Fiction November, Carnegie Shadowing, National Poetry Day. And then there's a sequence of very practical ideas, and many of them, well, in fact, most of them are rooted in the experience of members of the School Libraries Committee, school librarians that I've worked with for many years. So they are tried and tested, and ideas small, medium and large that you can pick up and run with. So things like book awards, reading champions, patron of reading, reading buddies, all those kind of initiatives that you might like to operate in your school, book clubs and reading groups. And I know Lucy gave me a really good resume of breakfast reading clubs that she's been involved in, having got some funding specifically for running a breakfast reading club. Things like staff reading groups, either getting staff reading books that their students will enjoy, or linked to initiatives like I Am Reading posters, where members of staff have a poster of themselves and the kind of book covers of things that the books that they are reading or the books that they have read. Book weeks, book quizzes, I think they have become more and more standard in a lot of school librarians' work. But things, seasonal things like Christmas Advent calendar, where staff and students get allocated a day in the Advent calendar, and behind the window is the book that they want to champion, and that student or member of staff opens the Advent calendar on that day and talks about the book that has some meaning for them. Ideas like, I really loved this one from Emma Suffield at St Wilfrid's Academy, who's a previous School Library Associate School Librarian of the Year award. She put 6 golden tickets into books that haven't been taken out in a while. And then if a student does read a book and one of those books and discovers the golden ticket, they're asked to write a short summary of it and they win a prize. And she also does, which I really loved, get caught reading raffles. So when students are caught reading silently in the library at break and lunchtime, they're issued a raffle ticket by one of the student librarians. And at the end of every half term, the raffle's drawn and the winner receives a big goodie bag full of reading related materials. Obviously, author visits, one of the great tools we have to inspire children to read and help create that reading-rich environment is through enabling students to meet authors and interact with authors, illustrators, poets, storytellers. And some of you out there will have all organised many of those, so you'll have seen for yourself the impact that they can have. But if you are brand new to this, then hopefully this chapter will help you think about how to approach them, how to plan them, how to deliver them so that the event is enjoyed by students, staff, and that you survive. And more about this later. The other thing it looks at is the rights of the reader. Daniel Pennock, in his book, The Rights of the Reader, says, don't make fun of people who don't read, or they will never read. And I think the challenge for school librarians is how do you enthuse those non-readers and try and get them reading, but without pressurizing them. And I think, again, it's worth thinking about. Don't get hung up on how children should read or where. And again, I just wanted to share with you, because I a quote in the chapter from Val Dewhurst, who's a librarian at Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School. And she says, it doesn't matter how, it really doesn't matter how a book is read, print or digital. It really does not matter where it is read. The school library, school bus, quiet reading corner in a classroom, at home, wherever. What matters is that reading is happening and being enjoyed. Using mobile devices and iPads to access ebooks is without doubt something we should be promoting if this helps us to rekindle, restore, or resurrect reading habits. And I think that's quite an important point that we need to think about. The chapter also explores possible funding sources, how to approach looking for funding for something you want to do, and puts you in the direction of some possible funding sources. It looks at and explores working with other school staff. What are the strengths and the support that you can get in your school, potentially from other staff that you're working with? What can they bring to the table and what can you give to them? And it also offers the kind of support that you can look for and get from if you have a school's library service in your area. And then at the end, like all the other chapters, it offers further information, it offers follow-up activities and, various references. So, as I say, passion, promotion and practicality for this chapter.
Okay. Information and digital literacy, and you might actually include media literacy in this. This is such a difficult term. Everybody has different ways of explaining what it is. And I bet if I did a straw poll amongst the participants now, everybody would say something different. The thing is that teachers do understand the term literacy because literacy is something that Ofsted assess. So if you're having an inspection, they'll look at how your literacy levels are. But they don't really understand the allied literacies that go along with this. And the origins of information literacy really are UNESCO, who actually identified it in 2006 as a universal human right. Then CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Librarians and Information Professionals, of which SLG is part, they actually did a new definition in 2018 that looks at all aspects of life that this filters into. And that's been taken further just this year, earlier this year, by the Media and Information Literacy Alliance, MILA, who again are looking at how we embed it in the community so that we grow lifelong digital and information citizens, people who are aware of that and who are not going to get duped by the latest scam that's on the internet. So we can teach research skills using an information literacy model. And there are three basic types. There's a search and use type model, there's an inquiry-based model, and there's a discipline-specific one for something like science, for example. But the problem we've got is that the national curriculum that we follow in England is really what we call a behaviourist curriculum. It's about learning facts and then regurgitating them. And we don't really look at what's called the constructivist approach, which is more inquiry-based, which was developed by a couple of psychologists called Piaget and Vygotsky. So we have to kind of adapt around this, and we have to look for opportunities. And this chapter is going to show you how you can make the most of those opportunities. Things like in junior schools, there is lots of opportunity for project work, maybe in Key Stage 3 and secondary. And certainly if the students are doing an extended project qualification, or if you're lucky enough to follow the International Baccalaureate curriculum, there will be opportunities to put inquiry-based learning and information literacy into practice. Then we've got the other side of it. It's going to look at digital literacy. And again, we're going to look at some models for digital literacy. What is digital literacy? Some people think it's just the ability to use a computer effectively, but it's not really. It overlaps with information literacy because it's all about how we can apply this kind of competency to inquiry-based work or project-based work or just life. Now, one of the things about this, and it is explicit in the chapter, is how we need to put some effort into working collaboratively with teachers. And that might be what we're going to have in the lesson, planning that lesson together. But it might even be, where is the lesson going to be held? Is it going to be in the classroom? Is it going to be in the library? Are we going to do a mixture of both? So within this chapter, we're going to learn how we can put all of this together by looking at searching and finding information, selecting and recording the information we find, evaluating it, looking at academic integrity to make sure we've referenced properly, how we present the findings that we've got, and even more importantly, how can we find those resources we need to support this kind of learning? So in this chapter, we're going to say, look for opportunities. We're going to be able to see how we can embed these things in practice so that we can make a difference. We're going to read that national curriculum right the way through so that we have an understanding of it and therefore can work with teachers and speak the same language so that we can try and get them on board and try and work with them, because we're trying to embed these skills in our students for life. It's not just for school, it's for further education, and it's beyond further education in the world of work and just how they live from day to day. So that's the chapter on information and digital literacy. Hope you're going to enjoy it, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so next is a chapter I wrote on using technology to enhance the library experience. I found this wasn't that it was hard writing, but what the problem I had with that I didn't want my chapter to date, and it could literally be out of date within a month of publishing the book with technology. So you'll find in my chapter that I have concentrated more on principles of the sort of technology you should be having in your library, and the sort of things you want to be doing, rather than pushing the latest fad, the latest TikTok, whatever, because we want this book to be durable. Okay, so the library website is something that we'll be looking at. What sort of website do you want, or what sort you should have? That it should have a clear and uncluttered design, Don't, just because you can put lots of pictures of authors and books on the front page doesn't mean you should. And it should be as central as you can make it, easy to find on your website. So have a talk with the people who run your website and try to explain to them that the library should really be with the curriculum, with the other subjects. And I know I've had this conversation myself. Yes, I know it isn't a subject. No, it isn't a facility like the sports hall. Believe me, I've had that conversation. But when people look for the library, they're obviously going to look for where the subjects are. Another thing I've done with my online library is I've collected links to other school resources and put them all on the one page. So even though I haven't paid for these other resources, I have put them all in the library resource page with the resources I have paid for and the free resources, so that everything is together, and it's showing that the library is a central place for accessing e-resources. Include a link to your library management system, really, really important. You should be able to get to that from your page on the school website. And include opening times and other useful information, so that if a parent wanted to know what time's your library open after school, can Johnny come in the library and work after school, they can find that easily by just checking on the website. Other things you can include is obviously photos of yourself and other staff and their names and an easy contact email to get in touch with you. Social media. Social media can be really difficult to handle. And we all seen and heard horror stories about people who've gone viral by mistake or put the wrong thing on. So I talk about the rules that underpin having any social media account for your school. So whether that is Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, any of the big social medias, you need to be careful. You need to remember your audience, especially if you have more than one account. Now I've got about 4 Twitter accounts that I run at the moment, and I always have to remind myself which one I'm on and put my voice or change my voice. So if I'm on my school one, I know that it reflects on the school, and my head would call me in and speak to me if I had written something that reflected badly on the school. So think carefully before you post. If you find it easy not to post at weekends and after school because you feel that perhaps you might get your voices mixed up, then just use it in school time. It takes a lot of practice. Follow authors, publishers, reading sites so you can retweet their materials. Also, you can @ the authors if you read a book. So if you're promoting a book, always @ the author. Put the always @ the publisher so you can get greater coverage. But I go into that in the chapter. And use the hashtags that other people use. So that will give you greater visibility when people are looking. And very quickly, because I've got loads of these in the chapter, not all resources are expensive, and there are lots of free good resources for students, and I list quite a few of those. Check with the teaching staff about what they will find useful before buying a resource they are not invested in and won't promote. I have made that mistake. Bought into an expensive resource because I thought it would be absolutely brilliant. Not one sausage used it, so I had to drop it after a year. Very expensive mistake, very stupid. Now I give them the free trial if they don't want it. Even if I think it's the best thing since sliced bread, I don't buy it, because if they can't be bothered to look at the free trial, they're not going to use it. And as I said, collecting everything onto one library page helps students think of you as the central place. Okay. So, chapter 7, back to Barbara.
Right, so chapter 7, equality, diversity and inclusion in the school library. Well, actually, did I put, well, equity, diversity and inclusion. If you're going to really create a library that's a whole school resource, what's been called the beating heart of the school, then you need to engage with your whole community. Now, equity is important because it means that all students will have equal access and opportunities regardless of anything that may prevent this. I'm sure you've all seen that image of 3 people looking over a fence, a tall person of medium height and a shorter person. And then it shows equality is giving them all a box to stand on, and the tall person is even taller. The person of medium height can see over the fence, and the person that's shorter still can't see over the fence. Equity is giving nothing to the tall person, 1 box to the person of medium height so they can see, and 2 boxes to the shorter person so they can see as well. So giving them different amounts of boxes puts them all at the same height. So equity, as opposed to equality, is giving each according to their needs to make them equal. So in a school library situation, this might mean that you decide you are only going to allow your audio books, because maybe you don't have a huge collection. You only want those to be loaned to students who have visual disabilities or that are dyslexic because they struggle with reading things. Now, diversity is basically accepting that everyone is different and reflecting that within your library. There is no such thing as normal, right? If people say, oh, you know, when people talk about this is the norm, there isn't a normal. Diversity is the normal within any group, okay? Inclusion is ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to be involved. So in a supportive and inclusive library, you will have diversity valued, with all students respected. Your resources and your services and activities will be relevant and reflect your student body and their needs. And everyone will have equal access, and hopefully they will all have equal participation in things. And this sort of ties in with what I was talking about with the library ethos. So why is this aspect so important? It's linked with students' identity, how they see themselves, the cultural group they identify with, okay? And representation of this, representation of their identity, of their cultural groups, of their religions, representation is within the library so important. So they need to see themselves, and it needs to be visible, which means thinking about your keywords you use, thinking about your displays, your promotions. You may know you have a diverse collection of books with your student body represented, but if this is all on the shelves, they won't know that if these books are just stuck on the shelf. They need to be made aware that those books are there for them, okay? The library also needs to be a true reflection of society. This, I feel, is important even if your school demographic is narrow. You know, it's no good, whereas you think, right, we'll do a school audit and we'll find out what the demographic of the school is. If it comes out very narrow, you can't just concentrate on that for your collection. You have to widen it to show what society is like, because these students are living and working within the society. Now, all of this, you know, showing, having books that link with identity and representation, making them visible, reflecting society within the library. All of this helps to create understanding and empathy. And I think this is one of the most important roles of a school library, because too often other areas of the school are slow to change. They have a curriculum they have to stick to. Teachers tend to use the same displays for parts of the curriculum. Reading lists are a great example, because reading lists don't change very often. And we can be a beacon. I really believe school librarians can be a beacon. We can lead by example with regards to equity, diversity and inclusion. So what will you find in chapter 7? It obviously covers why this aspect is important, the things I've spoken about. It looked at the legal aspects, such as the Human Rights Act, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Equality Act, Ofsted and safeguarding provision, and how these feed into your policies. The physical space and promotions are covered. There's a section on how to obtain the demographics of your school community via an audit and what factors you need to consider when you're doing this, and how you can use these results to create a diverse collection. And also this section has a mentions terminology, the use of terminology and how this changes based on culture and society at the time. So again, another very important chapter for you to make, to help you make your library welcoming and inclusive to your student body. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next up, we have Lucy Chambers on advocacy, marketing and evaluating your library.
Great. Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. I have written 2 chapters, so I'm starting with advocacy, marketing and evaluation. This chapter, how I'm going to talk about it, is divided into 3 interlinked sections. I look at how school librarians can plan, market, evaluate and demonstrate their value and impact, how to advocate and why this is important. My approach is quite practical, based on my experience and what I find works. The first section looks at the importance of advocacy. In advocacy, I look at practical ways to advocate for school librarians within the school and also for the profession. You may be a sole librarian amongst teachers and other staff who may have no idea how librarians contribute to school life and the whole curriculum, and how they can enhance children's education, from improving reading skills, widening reading, teaching students how to choose books, and improving their well-being too. I use real-life experiences of school librarians to give context. These case studies range from librarians with no previous library experience to librarians with years of experience, and I also include some of my own scenarios. In the second section, could you change the slide, please? Thank you. The second section, I look at marketing. For marketing, I look at what it is and practical ways to create a marketing strategy. I introduce the work of Kathy Dempsey via the True Cycle of Marketing. This is a diagram I found really helpful, as it shows you how you can plan for marketing and evaluation at the same time. This is the key to stepping back from your day-to-day work and looking at your work in the wider and more long-term strategic context. You may think that as a new librarian, this is beyond you, but long-term planning happens in schools, generally via the school development plan or via the school, by the SIP stuff, by Ofsted plan, basically. And it's equally important for your work in the library. I look at how you can work out the current facilities of your library and think about your library objectives. I also give some tips about promoting library activities and have a look at library branding. Could you, next slide, please? So in the final section, I look at evaluation. Evaluation is a subject with much theory and complicated vocabulary, but I have tried to just include bits which I think are practical for school librarians to incorporate into a strategic approach. I look briefly at different sorts of evaluation terminology and different systems, and mainly at practical ways to use evaluation techniques. I also suggest how to collect and use evidence of your activities and which shows your impact in school libraries. I quote many practical case studies from school librarians with a range of experience. One of the most important documents I have found is the planning sheet, how you actually plan your activities. And you would use this in the strategic approach to being a school librarian. Your plan can incorporate marketing, whatever your activity is, how you're going to market it, how you're going to promote it, and what evidence you're going to gather. And it allows you to consider also how you can advocate for your library. So that's a sort of rather quick summary of the chapter. We now move on to the primary school librarian. Okay. Right. The primary school librarians, I think, are rather undervalued in the UK, with some people running libraries not having any specific training, and some school staff perhaps unaware that librarianship is even a profession with specialist skills. This chapter is of value, I think, to primary schools and prep school settings, but the whole book is equally relevant too. It's very hard to generalise about primary school libraries, as each one is run in a different way, with variations in size, stock, staffing, and approach to the national curriculum, and also the teaching of reading skills. So the first slide looks at the inequality of provision of school libraries in primary schools. This is courtesy of the former Children's Laureate, Cresta Cowell. Her Children's Laureateship project was a call to improve the provision of primary school libraries. She published a charter that includes the statement that every child has the right to have advice from a trained librarian or bookseller. I think this is really important. My informal research shows that even in some school chains with primary and secondary schools, the primary school may not have a library, and if it does, the person running it may have received no training, no specialist training. The aim of this chapter is to look at some key issues in primary school librarianship. It's not a how-to chapter as such, but it's rather an exploration of important issues. Though I do give you some leads as to where you can find how-to information. I include essential skills, support organisations, developing the reading culture, although that's also covered elsewhere in the book, information skills teaching, that's also covered elsewhere, some differences between primary and secondary school libraries, and non-library based book collections that primary and prep schools often have, and sometimes school librarians are expected to look after. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. The second slide, I look at the work of a school librarian. My approach is practical. It's based on my experience and research as a primary school librarian for more than 20 years. As for the previous chapter, I include case studies from my own experience and that of other primary school and prep school librarians. We all have mixed library training experiences. Primary school librarians may be involved in reading skills teaching, or they may be purely concerned with developing reading for pleasure. They may also work on research and library skills across the curriculum, much like secondary school librarians. But primary school librarians are less likely to have received librarianship training, or so it seems. I list some sources of specialist training, and other chapters in this book, such as chapters 1, 4, 10, and the appendices, are also particularly relevant. So could I have the next slide, please? So in this section, I look at primary school libraries. I look at the librarian as an expert. So primary school libraries, like secondary school ones, are cross-curricular. Children need to develop reading skills to access subjects in primary and secondary school, and they need to know how to find books in larger libraries for access to the curriculum, their interests, and further education subjects. I see primary school libraries as a taster for larger libraries. So as well as encouraging wide reading and developing the school's reading culture, primary school librarians also need to know how to set up a consistent, usable catalogue and to organise books into different sections. For example, fiction in one, you would organise that in one way, non-fiction you'd organise in another way. They also need to be able to train pupils and staff to use the various library systems that you've set up. These are important steps in encouraging children to use libraries effectively for lifelong learning. I conclude both chapters 8 and 9 with some practical tasks to undertake and also further reading. I hope you find these chapters and the whole book useful. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, so the book concludes with where do you move on? The CPD and qualifications. So once you've done your first few years and got yourself established and put these lessons into practice, what's next for you? Well, CILIP have 3 levels of professional registration, which are on the job. So with certification and chartership, you can come in at either level you choose. And these you compile portfolios basically proving that you can do what you say you do. So it's more like an NVQ in that. You don't need to write essays. You will be doing some reflective writing. So that's just writing, reflecting on what you do. But we run regular courses on that. And Sarah Pavey is a whiz at reflective writing. So there's anything you don't know, you can ask Sarah. So most of you, if you are running your school library yourself as solo, actually you'd start at chartership, because if you're running your own budget, or if you have staff working with you and you're working with literacy leads and all of that, that is actually chartership level, and that's where you would start. Certification is perhaps if you're an assistant librarian, so you don't make the management decisions, or perhaps if you're running one of the smaller primary school libraries and you're not taking the management decisions on budget and everything, you can start at certification and then move up to chartership. And then fellowship is when you've had several years in the profession and you're doing some work of note. It is worth becoming either certified or chartered and becoming part of CILIP. They are professional qualifications that many employers do still. I've seen job adverts where they do still ask for these qualifications. They won't necessarily get you anything more in pay, but they will help you and you want to move on to a better paid job. And that's how it worked for me. So we also talk in the chapter about professional reading and what that is. And it doesn't have to be scholarly journals full of huge, difficult concepts. Anything you read or watch and causes you to think about your own library and how you could change your own library is professional reading. Obviously, it includes our book, which is why I've got a picture of it there. But it also can include posts on SLN. Those of you who are members of SLN, you read a post, you interact with the writer, you want to implement what they're doing. This is evidence for your certification of chartership. So it really isn't as hard as it sounds. Like I said, it's not a series of essays at all. You would write up, oh, I saw this on SLN. I thought this was a good idea. I implemented it in my school and this was the result. That is what you show for your chartership. Conferences and short courses, again, they're excellent for your own CPD. Short courses are great to fill gaps in your knowledge. So you can go on SLG courses, you can go on SLA courses. There are other professional courses as well, and they can just target as a gap in your knowledge. I would always advocate training from your library management system, especially if you're changing system or you're new to it. Always get the school to invest in professional training, because otherwise you've bought an expensive resource and you're just trying to learn how to use it in your spare time. And that's not really an efficient use of a new resource. You can get free courses on FutureLearn, which is Open University, where you learn at your own pace. If you just put in reading, you'll find there's lots of really good courses. And watch out for SLG's course, which will be coming there, but we will be trailing that on Twitter and we are advertising that. Conferences like the one that we've coming up are great places to hear what's new in the world of libraries. They're good for networking. You get keynote speakers from the world of education and libraries. and especially good for networking, especially if you're going to an in-person conference. They're really good for getting to know other people. So they are all worth, it's always worth staying connected in the libraries world. I've learned so much from other people that if I just stayed running my own library and not bothered going, I would have been so much worse as a librarian, because you just learn from other people. So this chapter is all about encouraging your own CPD, how you can feed it into your school, and how you can get your school to acknowledge what you're doing outside of learning inside school and their courses. Thank you for attending tonight. I do hope that you're all excited about reading the new book when you get your copy. I know I can't wait to get a hold of a real copy in my hand, so I'm really excited. I hope that the book will be everything that we promise and more. We'd love it if you put reviews on wherever, on Amazon, on Goodreads. Write to us, let us know. And if you need to contact us, you can either contact Barbara Band, who organised tonight, so you all have her email, or contact me at chair.slg@silip.org.uk. and any questions or comments you want to make. Okay, thank you all. Thank you everyone for coming, and have a good rest of your evening. Good night.